All righty, guys. Sorry for
We're
a little bit of
live.
sorry for a little bit of late on the kickoff. I had to get some stuff on the stream and get everything ready. But happy launch. Y'all like, subscribe, share it, and get it out there. And I'm gonna hand it over to Mr. Tony or Mr. Terry and let him
Oh, that'll
let
be in a
him.
couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, that's we got a good one planned, but I'm gonna let Mr. Terry
Oh,
let y'all know what we're going through.
so what we're going to do, good morning, everybody. So, what we're going to do is there's a bunch of questions already. We're going to try to get as many of them answered as we can first. Then I'm going to start telling stories. Um, and hopefully that'll bring up questions. I've been told to quit worrying about whether nobody's asking questions because you'd listen to me talking about oatmeal. Well, hopefully we've got some not only funny stories but informative, because apparently there's quite a few new folks on here, and for some people it's going to be a repeat of stuff you've heard on other ones, but to get all the new folks brought up to speed, we're going to cover it. And who knows, as I tell them, it may bring up other stories that I haven't even covered yet. So let's get started.
Absolutely, absolutely. While
So
Jason's
Bud's going
getting
to lead.
yeah, while Jason, go ahead and get some of yours that you've got saved. I've got a few that I've already written down while me and Terry were chit chatting. But let's see here. One that keeps constantly coming up, and some of these are might not be answerable to the fullest extent, but and especially with you with the hatchet forces, these will be coming up later on as well. But for your personal thoughts, either on the range, coming across them in combat against you, or even just getting to maybe use them here and there, what were your overall thoughts on the on Soviet weapons?
Especially the AK-47. That son of a bitch, you could drag it behind a deuce and a half down a gravel road all day long, and that thing would still be firing. It was probably even more dependable than our M16s, which in the beginning weren't that dependable. They had other weapons that we didn't have, like the RPGs. Those things, I know personally, those things scared the hell out of me. SKS, an SKS, it only held like 5 rounds, and but primarily the AK-47. I mean, that sucker was rock solid.
Yeah,
Okay.
and another. I know y'all face them a lot in the hatchet forces as well as the recon teams. But did y'all have a special way to combat the RPD? Because I hear a lot of people wanting to know what it was like going against the RPD as opposed to y'all using them against the NVA.
I don't think we had any strategy. I mean, an RPD is an RPD. It was firing a lot of ammo at us, and you're firing back. We had M60s.
Would y'all key in on them like they'd key on y'all's machine guns to get them quiet quickly?
Oh hell yeah! The idea would be, if you can tell that they're firing a machine gun at you, you want to take that out as quickly as you can. So whether it be, if it's close enough to throw grenades, which is doubtful, but that's where the M79 came in. You want to put some high explosive M79 rounds on that RPG and take it out as quick as you can. I'd rather go up against 10 guys with AKs than one guy with an RPG. or
Dang.
any of them. Well, I mean, just, it's high volume weapon. I'm sure that they would rather go up against an M16 than go up against an M60. You know, what about the AK-47 compared to the CAR-15? Everybody's got their own opinions. I'm not an AK-47 guy. I'm a CAR-15 guy. Have I fired the AK-47? Oh, quite extensively. But when it comes right down to it, I prefer the M16. For the North Vietnamese soldiers coming down the trail, though, probably the AK-47 was a better choice because it was rock solid. It took a lot to clog it up. The M16 was a little more finicky as far as dirt and having to keep it clean and all that, whereas the AK seemed to be a lot more durable. So that's my opinion on one versus the other.
And you also got to remember, other than, of course, that's why eldest son started popping up to really strike fear.
Right.
The early M16s had, I've got a Marine sent me Operation Swift Sword. I've got it on the back bookshelf back here, and it talks about the early M16s and the ammo and the jams, and finding boys that were trying to break apart their rifles and were just executed by the NVA, and it was just bad news.
And I'll touch on that after a while when I talk about when I got shot the first time, because that's why I got shot. What'd you do if you know I'm going to target with anti-aircraft? Baz, I can tell you, virtually every target we went on had anti-aircraft of one type or another. Really, for us guys on the ground, what are you going to do? I mean, the anti-aircraft is up on the hills. Some of it was actually, because, Laos is very mountainous. There was a lot of caves. And in some of the really, really heavily targeted areas, they had rails going in and out of these caves, and they could wheel the anti-aircraft gun out of the cave, do their firing, and roll it back into the cave before the aircraft could drop a bomb on them. So, but us on the ground, I mean, the only thing you could do would maybe be to try to get to one of those anti-aircraft guns. And there were teams who were successful in doing that and try to take the gun out. But normally it would be your aircraft that would take out a gun if they were able to take one out.
Oh, wow. We've got some good questions before I get to mine.
Good. Guys, saw barrels were making. Oh, yeah. There were absolutely, to my knowledge, there were absolutely no restrictions on what you could do. That's why you had guys that took an M79 and they sawed the stock and the barrel off to where it was just a short little weapon, and then they carried it slung on their back. RPDs. I forget which recon team, but it was known for carrying a sawed-off RPD.
Joe Walker and Ed Walker.
Joe Walker, yeah. So yeah, I mean, there some of it was just, you got to think within safety. Some weapons, because of the way the recoil worked, or not the recoil, but the blowback to feed the next round and eject the old round, you can't shorten it beyond a certain point because of that piece of the weapon that does that function. But yeah, I mean, especially it seems like especially M79s and RPDs were the ones that were most modified.
Oh yeah, those. I mean, some guys would have them, nice and cut, short down, and still fairly long. The M79s, and then you'd have some guys that the Navy SEALs of today copied to where they look literally like an old pirate blunderbuss. They're just tiny
Yeah.
M79 pistol, literally.
Hmm. You got to
Um.
remember with the M79, that round has to go out the barrel and spin for 15 yards before it arms itself.
Mm.
And if it doesn't get that spin, it may start wobbling out of control and end up not going where you tried to put it. So there could be a downside to it too.
Absolutely. I've heard some guys that sadly, sometimes they'd work out well, and like you said about being they were too close, and thank goodness it had enough force already that it bludgeoned in somebody's chest. But some guys cut it down too far, and were practicing on the range, and the daggum thing blew up in their hands.
Right. And
So,
I'll cover that later
yeah,
too about
yeah, we've got
using an M79.
Yeah, well, guys, we've got some good ones also about some knives coming up, but we're going to cover some of the Twitter questions right off the bat if y'all that are just coming in. But another question that I found, you had I told the person that you covered a little bit of it in your earlier first two, but folks are mighty interested in when you first get into SOG and what the gear you get issued, and B, is there an immediate change, or do you go on a mission and then you start changing things, or how has that whole thing come about?
Okay, so when you first get there, you go down to the supply room, and who's in the supply room? Half the time it was Bob Howard, because he kept getting put in for Medal of Honors, and then they'd pull him out of the field, and you would draw a basic draw of equipment. Like for instance, you draw when I first got there, it was an M16. Later, it was the Car 15. You draw your M16, you'd get 20 magazine, 20 round mags. You draw basic stuff. You draw a rucksack, indigenous sleeping bag, canteens, your pistol belt, your harness, a carabiner, the rope for making your Swiss seat if you got to get pulled out on a string. You draw your basic equipment. So then you get all that shit put together, canteen covers and all that. And then, God, I was only there maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I don't know. It's been a long time. So we drilled and trained during that time down on the range. And little by little, you start to get a feel for, okay, what do I like about this setup? What do I not like about it? Then you talk to the older guys and look at how they've got their gear. And you'd fine tune over a period of time. It didn't all happen at one time. You'd fine tune it to what worked for you. And again, there was no rules. It was every man for himself in terms of how you wanted to do it. There were some things like you get ready for a mission and it's like, okay, every American carried 3 little morphine syrettes in their right chest pocket. That way, if you got shot, the medic or whoever would know on every American that's where the morphine is. We all carried you'll see on harnesses back here behind the neck, you'll see a round tube, and that was the serum albumin for IVs. There were some things like that. It was pretty consistent. So yeah, I mean, we had a lot of flexibility And there was flexibility in how you arrange the gear. And once Bud gets his act together and gets his high-speed internet where we can show pictures,
10 more days.
Got some really 8 more days. We're counting. He's got some really good pictures of mine showing all my gear that are close up enough we can point out, okay, this, and this. Another thing that, from what I remember, we all did is, so I carried my knife on my left shoulder. On the right shoulder, we all had our strobe lights, and they were in these little nylon case, you call it, with tabs at the top with a snap. So you snap it shut so you don't lose it. But when it comes time to use it, all you had to do was unsnap it and push the button on the bottom to turn it on. And because it's in that nylon container, the beam would go straight up so the planes could see it instead of the beam going out all over the place. Knives, and I guess this will lead into Bud. He has a little show and tell. What kind of knife you carried, again, was personal choice. Bud, probably one of the most common knives carried was the K-bar. I don't know if it's because guys wish they were a Marine or what, or they thought it was a more badass knife, but it's got that big lug on the end of it for hitting something, and the blade is a very heavy, so the end of the hilt you could use for hammering on something. The blade is really thick and heavy, so that was a really popular knife. My preference was something a little smaller. It was an Air Force survival knife that I carried on my left. And then
left shoulder pocket, or left shoulder
with the hilt down. So, and it was taped onto my web gear. And then if I needed to pull it, all I got to do is unsnap it and pull it. Now, did I ever pull it and use it like in a knife fight or anything? No. It was just used for cutting stuff up. There were guys, I was telling Bud yesterday, when we graduated from, oh God, look at that thing.
I'll tell the story after you finish this one.
Yeah. When we were graduating from training group, it seemed like everybody was running down to the PX and buying either a Gerber Mark III or a Randall. Mm-hmm. I think more Gerbers than anything else, mainly because they look cool with that long pointed blade. I didn't buy one because, I don't know. I grew up in the woods and stuff, and I knew I was going to want something more practical, Mm-hmm. That knife Bud just showed, I just can't even picture myself carrying something that big.
The only reason this was carried, to let y'all know, this was not a normal carry knife. This was specifically carried on 2 operations by the recently passed Mo Worley, strictly for a POW grab. And as y'all can see, Terry, what do you think this is? This is probably about a 12-inch knife with a 9-inch blade, or?
Yeah, that looks like maybe somewhere around a 9 or 10-inch blade. And then when you add the length of the handle and everything, you're probably looking at 14 inches or so.
And it is deadly sharp with a deadly tip. And it got real bad, and Mr. Mo ended up somehow getting away from the group of guys and finessing his way around to where 2 NVA were chucking grenades and putting up a hell of a fight. And he killed one and ran up behind the other, snatched him by the head of his hair, and put that long blade underneath his throat and said in perfect Vietnamese, "If you move, your head is gone." And he dropped his weapon, and Mo scabbarded that bad boy and immediately headed off to the LZ. So that is a reproduction.
Jeez.
It's not the exact model, but it is the exact recreation, the Jim Bowie that Mo Worley used.
Wow.
And hell, look at that.
Okay.
It's so big. The
Yeah.
scabbard. I mean, that lets you know how big the damn thing is.
Good Lord.
And
Okay. Next.
there's the 20 round mags that Terry was speaking about earlier. This is my father's that he actually had, and I wanted to show these off for guys to realize that when Terry's talking about grabbing 20 of these or 25 and putting 18 rounds in, you've got to remember how much this weighs. I mean, it's bad enough carrying a gun with a fully loaded magazine in it and a few more. Imagine 20 more fully loaded on your body, humping in the boonies.
So on Hatchet Force, because I've heard it described as more safety in numbers, there was a lot more of us, so the volume or amount of ammo that you carried was not necessarily as critical as on a recon team. I've read of some recon teams carried 600 rounds instead of 400 for obvious reasons, because there's not as many of you, and if you get in deep shit, you can't sit there and wait on a resupply chopper. So when I got there in October of '68, all we had was 20 round mags. Plaster, I think, is the one who originally worked a deal. Somebody back in the States was selling, I'll call them off-brand because they weren't government issue, 30 round mags. And he had some shipped over, and at least a lot of the guys on recon had at least one 30 round mag.
I recently found out he had a private company out there from where he grew up, and they decided to try and make a couple for y'all, and ended up shipping some over.
If I had one 30 round mag, that would be the one that was in my Car 15 all the time to start off with. So,
do you want to explain a little bit more about that, and also the tidbit on top of that, guys? I'll get to y'all's questions. Y'all got some great ones coming in. I heard a story. One of the guys was mentioning yesterday or the day before, saying that we'd got the new 30s all of a sudden, and everyone was so happy and all that. And before we went out, the S4 or what have you came out and said, now. These are all brand new, and you can't get replacements, which was a lie. And he said, "Yo, when you get done, you need to pick them up off the battlefield or do what you got to do." And he's like, "What? You want me to stop in the middle of a gunfight and stop and pick up this 30 round magazine and all of that?" So guys actually started losing them to where they could actually get more 30 rounders.
If somebody told me that, I'd invite them to go with me on the next mission and assign them to pick them up. Oh, you ain't got time for that shit. When the shooting starts and you got to change magazines and you're in the middle of a firefight, you drop the mag, you slam another one in. Now, maybe when stuff dies down and you're not moved from where you're at, yeah, then you got time to bend down and pick up the empty mags. But if you're on the run,
that's the furthest thing from your mind. You're wanting to stay alive, by God.
See, that sounds like, to me, that sounds like some rear echelon motherfucker that's never been in combat.
Right? He was non-SF as a supply clerk at CCN.
Yeah.
Let that sink in.
Yeah. Okay, buddy, come with me the next time, and I'll let you pick them up behind us as we're on the move.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, picture a recon team, a 9-man recon team under heavy fire. They might have a whole company chasing them, and they're trying to get to an LZ. You think they're going to stop and pick up their mags? Shit. Not going to happen, dude.
Unless it's a fallen brother, they ain't stopping for shit.
Exactly. Okay.
Do you want to hit some more questions real quick from the viewers?
Yeah, let's try to get you and Jason's questions done first, and then I can start on the
on the viewer
stories.
questions. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've got some viewer questions. I was going to say, do you want to do the viewers or finish up some of mine and Jason's?
I don't care. Either one. I'm not seeing the questions on the side of the screen like what you just put up. Usually I see them over on the right side of the screen, and I'm not getting that.
And maybe because we're on my computer, we'll have to fix that.
Okay. I've heard several incidents where unwanted people suffered accidents that led to their removal from SOG. Yes, it did happen, infantry. And I think some of that's happened even in today's world. I don't know your definition of an unwanted person, but personally, I know one person that I would never want him. And I was on missions with him. I'd never want him covering my ass. And I think I said this last week on the other show, if you get out there's no way to predict. There's no way, I don't think, anyway, my opinion is no matter how much training you do, until you actually get out in the field in a real live combat situation where real live bullets are coming at you, I don't know that you can accurately predict how a person is going to react.
Absolutely.
You get out there. I know of several situations where people froze, became catatonic. Well, once the shit's over with and they get you out of the field and you get back to the FOB, I guarantee you within 24 hours, that person or less is on a plane out of there, never to be seen or heard from again. Because you can't have, and I say especially on a recon team, but I mean, it's true for Hatchet Force too. And two of the examples I know of were Hatchet Force. You can't have somebody like that if you can't depend on them. And it's not for everybody. Some people, oh man, I'm going to be a Green Beret, and I'm going to be badass. But then they get in combat and then all of a sudden they can't handle it. So, yes.
I'll let you know of one that not even like Mr. Terry's talking about a guy freezing up or maybe messing up. In the field, so to speak. This man was on a RT, Ed Walkoff's RT, and he actually has spoken about it. Doesn't mind if I speak about it because this is well known. They were getting ready for a mission. It was the first time John St. Martin was on the team with Ed, and their 1-0, who was fairly accomplished, ran a lot of missions at CCC and CCN, CCC, and he was off by himself at the launch site, and they walked over there, and the yard started kind of shaking their heads and getting real angry and all that. They walk up on the 1-0, and I would say guess, but y'all wouldn't dare guess what he was doing. He was sitting there smoking a bowl of opium before he was about to hit the field, and the Montagnards walked up at Ed and said, either he goes or we go. And about that time, the Colonel Lapp walked up and saw all this going down, caught him, and before you could even say, he said, can one of y'all run this mission? It needs to be run. John St. Martin stepped up, they ran it, and before they got back from that mission, that man was off the CC compound forever. I don't know if he went to another place, but he was gone.
They, in all likelihood, somebody like that would be shipped completely out of Special Forces.
That's especially literally being caught in the process of smoking. It's not
ridiculous.
Hearsay. It's he's sitting there smoking
it's
a pipe, loading
No.
up.
I know who you're talking about, and it happened. It's pure fact.
Yeah.
Okay. Lee Birkins had 130 rounder to start out full of hollow points.
I think
Really?
maybe tracers. I don't know.
I don't know, Jason. You know what? And I reload ammunition, and I've been reloading 223s for years, and I have never even heard of a 223 or 5.56 hollow point.
I don't.
Um,
I don't know if they do that. I'll look at that
I
and see.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard of a hollow point, but tracers. That's all. We could get them. I shouldn't say it, but I've got a whole ammo can full of tracers out in the workshop. I don't know what I'm
They're
gonna. I don't know what I'm gonna do with them, but I got them.
save them.
Um,
Hell, it may come in handy one day when shit falls apart and you need to start marking targets or all that when the doomsday comes.
yeah, and like Jason said, the RPD had these
RPD, yeah,
links.
those.
Yeah, you know, I mean, who's going to stop and pick them up? So
Exactly.
I
CCN
don't.
guys would go around to the CBs and everywhere and would beg and beg. And they found out one day that they were on a hot trail and had several thousand belts, ammunition, drums, and everything. They got there right as they set the pallet on fire to destroy because no one had asked for it.
Wow, wow. Okay, there was another question that popped up before you put this one on there. Okay, what is this shrimp and bad again? Okay, bomb damage assessments we did all the time.
Oh
The
yeah.
one that I have the most memory of, and again, I wish I should have brought this stuff in from the workshop because I'm going to donate it to Fifth Group. Bomb damage assessments were something. They called us all. We did a pre-mission briefing, and they said, "Okay, you're going into this area." And I don't remember the area. It was one. There was a regimental base camp that had been discovered by a recon team. So they said, and just thinking about it, it's ridiculous the number they told us, but they said there's going to be 52 B-52s dropping 2,000-pound bombs on this regimental base camp, and we're going to put you in before the dust is even settled on the ground. Well, come on. We didn't even have 52 B-52s. But it was whatever it was, however many it was, they put us in at basically first light. I mean, it was probably 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. The dust had not even settled, and from the air, and I wish I had a picture, but I don't. The devastation from those bombs. I mean, you talk about a wasteland. I mean, we're talking trees that are 2 feet in diameter that are toothpicks now. The problem with these bomb damage assessments is the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong were masters at bunkers and tunnels and all that. So we get on the ground and we're going in some of these bunkers and there's still steaming bowls, literally hot bowls of rice still on the tables, stuff like that. And I've got a North Vietnamese canteen and an SKS, what's left of an SKS ammo pouch, because the guy didn't need it anymore,
And guys, I've got that to where he does his show and tell. I've got that linked in the show notes, as a matter of fact. So y'all go back and watch the shows listed, and Terry's got a wonderful, wonderful show and tell that he did of the objects he's talking about right now.
And next month, I'm going to be donating those down at Fort Campbell to the Fifth Group Museum. To carry on about the bomb damage assessments, like I said, these guys were masters at building bunkers and tunnels and all that shit. I'll bet we weren't in there more than maybe an hour and a half at the most. Keep in mind, a regimental base camp, you're talking about several thousand guys. We came under such heavy fire that we ended up having to be extracted. I mean, we're talking about a company and we had to get pulled out because we were getting our asses kicked. There were so many of them. Yeah, we killed a bunch of the airstrike killed a bunch of them, but there's a whole lot more of them that were, I guess, well, I'm sure they knew the airstrike was coming because they had their mole down in Saigon to tell them about every one of our operations. So we got some guys, but there were so many we didn't get, and we were getting our asses kicked up one side and down the other, numerically. So what do? Well, you work more airstrikes and try to at least get them heads down or whatever, so they can get choppers in and get us out. So I personally, and I think a lot of the guys would agree, that going in on bomb damage assessments was somewhat of a joke, because you're going to get your ass kicked. You're not going to kill
one could argue that's almost as dangerous as a normal hatchet force operation, if you really.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because the North Vietnamese knew if you're dropping that many bombs on an area, they know you're going to put a team in to see what kind of damage you did. So
not idiots,
right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I've got an interesting, before we go to the next question. I was actually speaking to Dave Hall, a modern GWAT Navy SEAL, and we were talking about SOG BDAs, and he mentioned he was on a BDA in Afghanistan, and he was alluding to how he reading about the SOG guys and all that on their BDAs, and having it hard to believe they'd find what they found, body parts and trees, this and that, all.
Oh yeah.
And they end up going in. He comes in. There's under thermal imaging, they see just a blood trail about 3 miles long to where they've got all the dead and already got them out, like the VC did. And they find one dead body, and he's pinned in between a tree but still alive. They capture him, and there's a guy on the ground next to him, and he's only bleeding out of his ears, no wounds, no nothing. The only issue is he's missing his entire face. It literally looks like the face-off operation.
Jeez.
And his face is on a tree next to him. Other than the face being off, he didn't look like he had been touched, and it was all the overpressure from that bomb that just jellified him and dropped him dead on the spot.
Yep.
And ripped his face off. Literally ripped his face off.
And it's been mentioned by a lot of the guys, when you work napalm, it sucks all the air out of the air. It's just like it creates like a vacuum when that canister hits and explodes. It just pulls in all the oxygen for several hundred yards away. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you telling me the first time we started speaking about how you can hear it just suck it all out of it. I mean, if you're not ready for it, you'll hyperventilate right then and there.
Yep. So when you see that canister coming down from the plane, you want to time it to where you're going to hold your breath at the same instant that it explodes. Absolutely. Because it'll suck. If it's close enough, it'll suck the air right out of your lungs.
Shit.
Okay.
Damn. Yep. Daniel remembers that mags from Dennis Thompson and them telling him he needed to collect all his mags. Yep. Lynn Black's 1-0. He froze up. Here we go. What was the difference that you noticed between soldiers trained for SOG and the ones like Nick who volunteered skill wise? I'm not sure.
Regardless of what unit a guy was in, once he's had real on-the-ground combat experience, everybody kind of, Bob Howard, put in for 3 Medals of Honor. He didn't originally come from training group. He came from a conventional unit. There was a lot of our SOG guys who came from, like, say, the 173rd or the puking buzzards or, another conventional unit that had combat experience, and then they came into SOG.
Hell, you had Signal Battalion guys coming in, I found recently.
Yeah, so I really think it was more, the distinction was more in how well they adapted to the SOG mindset.
Absolutely.
Because the mindset was a whole different mindset than in a conventional unit. and so I think it's, so I think it had more to do with if they assimilated into our mindset, then they did well. If they couldn't adapt to our way of doing things because they were used to doing it a different way, they weren't successful. Okay, bud.
Okay, we've got. I was getting. I'm here, man. I ain't asleep, brother. We've got 2 or 3 more, and then we can let you get into some of your stories. One is remember the one we covered earlier about it's a 2-parter. Sadly, the 2-parters kind of get long, but what methods did SOG use to locate the enemy, and also what modern gear would you personally like to have used if you could have got your hands on it back then?
Well, the second part of the question, what gear? Thermal imaging and night vision. And like we talked about, it sounds real good. However, and drones would be a third one. Number one, in triple canopy jungle, the drone would be worthless. It sounds good, but it would be worthless because it couldn't see anything. Number two, night vision. Again, if you're in triple canopy jungle, you got to have some kind of ambient light for that thing to work right. I don't know that it would work very well in triple canopy jungle. And then thermal imaging, to me, that would be really cool because when they're sneaking up on you in the middle of the night in the dark, or even I guess it works in the daylight too, thermal imaging would let you detect them sneaking in on you. It would let you maybe detect an ambush and stuff like that. So I think of the 3 in terms of ones that would be practical, I think thermal imaging would be the one that would be the most practical.
Oh yeah, especially seeing the battlefield today, it would be vastly different for y'all to have that on your Smart 15s.
Totally different. What was the first part of the question then?
The first part was it was a long one, but a good one. What methods did you use, or did SOG, I should say, use to locate enemies y'all have been searching for, or I guess better for you, what information would be gathered enough to constitute a Hatchet Force operation?
Okay, for instance, a recon team goes in and they're operating in a certain area that maybe there's rumors or speculation based on maybe a previous mission before them even, that maybe there is some, like say a large, like a regimental base camp, which we did the BDA on. That's what happened there. A recon team found it. So I think there's 3 things that we would use. One would be previous missions in an area. The next would be a recon team going in and, for instance, their primary mission was to go in and observe the Ho Chi Minh Trail, or one of the branches of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and see what kind of truck traffic is coming down. In the process of doing that, they discover that they're right on top of like say a regimental base camp, and then they would eventually get pulled out, and then that would be a target for hatchet force to go in. And I don't want to kid you here, but you'd be delusional to think that, okay, there's a regimental base camp, recon team can't handle it. We're going to send the hatchet force in and they're going to wipe them out. That ain't going to happen. The whole purpose of sending the hatchet force in would be to draw them into a fight and let the aircraft kill them all and let God sort them out, you know? And then the third thing would be the air crews, like say on the pilots that are probably mostly like the Coveys and that. They fly over an area and all of a sudden they see a couple hundred troops in the ground and they see hooches and all that stuff. They're like, okay, let's mark the coordinates and this would be a good target because obviously there's a lot of troops. So that'd be a good target to go in and hit. So I think those would be the three main ways of picking the targets.
All righty. We've got we're just now at 45 minutes, which will be good because we've got 3 questions, and then we can hand it over to you for some great stuff, which is what people are waiting for. But I was asked a question, one that I know I can answer. I'll be anxious to see if you might know a little bit about it, but I do know a little bit because I've spoken to one of the men who was on the last one. I was asked, do you know when the final SOG mission or missions were run?
They were in 1972. And between 71 and 72, you know, they technically, 5th group was out of the picture, and they changed the name. Caps. Yeah, they went to black ball caps and they changed the name to, depending on which camp you were at, TF1, AE2, Task Force 1, Advisory Element 2, or whatever. Yeah, it's just a smoke screen. But in that time frame, they were trying to transition to the Americans being less and less participatory on these missions, trying to turn it over to the Vietnamese. Yeah, we all know how that worked out.
Yes, I've got a great one. What I've got so far from talking, the CCN and CCS were the last ones to close. You've got, like you said, CCS became TF3AE, Task Force 3 Advisory Element, and their last missions were run in April and May of 1972 before the ARVN Liaison Service took over. But the STD and Special Mission Unit also stood up for a while, although they weren't doing cross borders. They were mostly bright lights. So officially, what I've gathered, the last Americans to run recon missions for SOG were Frank Pulley and Ken Bowray with RT Idaho, training them because one of the Viets took over as a 1-0. And then down at CCS, Pat Watkins is probably the last American to cross the border at CCS. He ran for a bright light and something else. And that's the last official SOG mission that I've been able to locate and verify 100%. So just to let that be known, I was glad you could help me out with that. While I'm getting the other one, Jason had one. I don't know if we've ever asked before.
Never heard of it, Jason. I mean, everybody knows that Shriver had a dog. At CCC, I never heard of dogs being used. I don't even, the only dogs I know of at CCC were the ones that we raised for food.
I can verify there was 2 dogs at CCC, once in 1967 with Bob Brown, if I'm not mistaken. He was with RT Colorado, and he and Buddha ran several recon missions. It didn't last long because they quickly realized a dog on a recon team ain't gonna work well.
Yeah.
And let me make sure that question is about to be coming back up, Shrimp. So I'll wait for Terry. And there was a question about SOG countries. Folks are noticing about Vietnam for in-country training. Y'all went into Cambodia. Y'all went into Laos. And I've been hearing rumors from Thailand workers that teams at least trained and were working in Thailand at some point in time with the 46th group, which is very secret squirrel.
I've heard that same rumor. I can't confirm it. It wouldn't surprise me. I've also heard rumors again that there was at least a couple of teams who went as far as the China border and possibly across the Chinese border.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Again, I mean, that's so secret squirrel that, you know, I don't know if you'd even find anybody today that would admit to something like that. But
no.
the rumors are there.
Yeah, we've got a few guys that served with the infamous Tony Poe and all that at NKP. So I do get a little information, but it's still so secret. He can't talk about a lot of what he did. He was SOG, but he was right there with the CIA guys in Thailand.
Yeah.
So,
and let's face it, if you look at the political climate today, there's some things that are best left not talked about.
Absolutely. All right, so we can start getting into stories, but I thought since this is the last question, maybe this could start us off somewhere.
Okay. Oh, you're going to make me go there. Okay. So in a previous thing, the question came up is how did you deal with seeing your buddies killed or going missing and all that kind of stuff? Unfortunately, a few guys did drugs, but drinking was a large part of the culture, I guess. You know, we had a club. I think all the camps had a club. And you could go, you know, you could go get a beer for like 25 cents or something. And you could, you know, sit. The guys like to hang out in the club and tell war stories. And it was not so much telling war stories to be bragging about I did this and I killed 1,500 men or some shit like that. It was actually talking about tactics and techniques and what'd you learn on this mission and that kind of stuff. But the drinking at times got totally out of control. When I came home for good, that month I was home before I had to report into Bragg, I was drinking 2 cases of beer a day.
Damn.
I had a brand new Corvette convertible. At 10 o'clock in the morning when Pizza Hut opened, I'd go down there and eat a large sausage, mushroom, black olive pizza and a pitcher of beer. And then I'd go up to the National Food Store where my brother worked, and I'd get 2 cases of Budweiser and ice them up and drive around looking for girls and drinking. And when I went down to Bragg, I went cold turkey for a while. Like it killed me.
Yeah,
but I realized, but you know, at some point you got to realize, you know, this is a ticket to nowhere, you know. So, yeah. And then I had a brother that was in the Marines. He was 13 months younger than me. He went over to Vietnam a month before me and came home a month before me, and we took turns getting shot and wounded and all that shit. And he became an alcoholic for the rest of his life. And you know, so.
Yeah,
let's see.
It's a tough the PTS and all of that y'all dealt with. My father was the same way. He was a recluse. He did drink a little bit, but his fallback was marijuana. It got him in trouble with the federal government. He did time, but that's what kept the demon. That's what kept the demons at bay. Yeah, they locked up a Vietnam vet over usable amounts, and he had to do 5 years.
I don't believe that I have PTSD, nor have I ever had it. But my philosophy is, and I said it the other day, you know, the rest of your life is going to be whatever you make out of it, not what somebody else makes out of it. And I've got hobbies and stuff. Like I got for 30 some years now, I've been involved in Civil War reenacting. I'm a saddle maker. I've had my horses for 50 years. I teach leatherworking classes to wounded soldiers, to the point where I even got an award from the president for doing that.
I was about to say, you need to actually say what that is. You actually earn, which is highly prestigious for a civilian. You earn the Presidential Silver Medal for your work with veterans. And I've got the letter from the White House out. I meant to bring it in just to show it, but you know, it's out in the workshop on the wall. So anyway, everybody had their ways of dealing with all this stuff, but I think overall, the booze was the biggest thing. You know, I've got a different philosophy on the whole deal. I volunteered for the Army. I volunteered for jump school. I volunteered for Special Forces. I volunteered for Vietnam. Like a fool, I volunteered for SOG. I volunteered to extend for another tour. I'm 100% disabled. I've had 41 major surgeries, and I'm maybe looking at 3 more. My opinion is that I have no right to be sitting around, whining and crying in my beer about all my misfortunes and all that shit. Bullshit. I ain't got time for that. There's a whole life out there, and I'm pretty happy with my life and the way things have turned out. So, but that's my attitude. You know, you see disabled veterans out on the street and, you know, homeless and all that. And we've got them around here because we're only a half hour from a military base. And I don't know. Not everybody would agree with me, but I say get off the booze, get off the drugs, and get a job. And then you wouldn't be homeless. That may not be the popular opinion, but that's my opinion. And I mean, yeah, sadly, I've learned. There's an outreach program here, and sadly, a lot of the homeless I've found aren't. I shouldn't say a lot. A good portion are there because they want to be. The other have caught terrible breaks, and they're waiting for that opportunity to be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But there is a percentage that want to be, and they thrive on taking advantage and not working and like that.
About 20. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're on the same thing.
About 20 years ago or so, the TV show 2020 did a program on Vietnam veterans and dealing with multiple marriages and alcoholism and all that crap. And they picked 3 guys. They took them back to where they had been stationed in Vietnam. And of course, most of our military bases over there are long since gone. At the very end of the show, like this one guy, he's been an alcoholic, been married umpteen times and all this kind of stuff. And they said, well, what was your job in Vietnam? Oh, I was a supply clerk. Well, then why do you have all these issues that you're blaming on Vietnam? Well, our camp got mortared one time, and I ran out of the building and I tripped over a body. That's it? Really? Okay. Why don't you put some SOG guys on this show and talk about real stress? You know. Anyway,
Exactly.
let's
Yeah.
let's
We've
move
gone
on.
down the rabbit hole. Yeah. I actually
Yep.
had we've got, before we get into some of your better stories, I found another question that was or not a question, but I finally found out a little indicator on where covey came from. Someone asked me where the
Oh,
term covey comes from. I can't 100%. I'm 95% because I've spoken to 2 recon men, and they have indicated that the term covey came about because they a mother hen looking over her covey, her group. So covey is a mother bird looking over her boys.
that makes all the sense in the world.
I can't verify, but
Um,
I've heard, and I think that sounds pretty damn good to me.
yeah, that would make sense. In conjunction with that question, the other part was where did the terms 10, 11,
Yes.
12, and 0102? I got no earthly clue. Those were the terms being used when I got there in '68. So, I mean, that's what's being used, so that's what we used. Was it Covey? No, Rick. Covey was not in the air at all times. Um, Again, you got issues with fuel for one. So a Covey would go up and they'd be good for a few hours. They'd have to go back and either one, okay, this Covey guy, today's his day. He'd have to go back to like Docto and refuel and then come back out. But you don't want the Covey flying over you all day long because that's just going to pinpoint to the NBA. So they would try to stay outside of our area of operations. And the Covey is also, depending on how many teams are on the ground, hell, you might have 4, 5, 6 teams on the ground at any one time, and you got one Covey. So he's got a large area to cover. And fortunately, you had Leghorn, which was our radio relay site that we can talk about eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But the Covey, and then, late in the afternoon, all the teams would settle into their RONs for the night. They'd give their last reports, and Covey would go home. Now, Covey goes home, but that doesn't mean you're all alone, because 24 hours a day, there's a C-130 flying around up there with an Air Force general on it. During the daytime, he's called Hillsborough. At night, he's called Moonbeam. And he's got the power to divert any and all aircraft anywhere in Southeast Asia in support if a team gets in deep shit. So somebody's texting me asking me if I saw their post with a question. So I'm trying to do that while I'm talking. So there was somebody available to us 24 hours a day, but not Covey. How long did it take for fast movers to get on target after making the call? Oh shit, that could be an hour or more, because you got to keep a look on a map and you'll see Laos, you see Vietnam, and you see the coast. Well, the fast movers generally were coming out of Da Nang that supported us. Sometimes they even came off an aircraft carrier. So it's going to take them a while to get to where we're at. We didn't like to use fast movers because they would have to get to us, drop their stuff, and turn right around and leave. They had no time to dilly-dally, or they'd run out of fuel. So
your best
that's
bet was
why
getting SPADs from NKP to come in, which was right close to y'all, and just obliterate them.
Now for us, our SPADs, to my knowledge, always came out of Pleiku, which was 23 clicks south of Khartoum. So to my knowledge, our SPADs all came out of Pleiku. Now up at CCN, probably a lot of their SPADs maybe came from NKP. And again, the reason we love the SPADs is because they could get on station and stay for 4 hours. You know, whereas the fast movers are in and out, boom. And, you know, so and this will help in the future. A little while ago, right as we were starting, they came and upgraded my one internet service. And so the alarm system keeps going off, and because until I turn it off and reboot it, it's going to keep going off. So I'm going to kind of hold my hand over the microphone for a second and yell at my wife what to do. Hey, honey. Come here.
It's fine. Y'all are bearing with me with my internet, so it's fine. We've got some good stories coming up. We've got some I've got a few good questions left, and he's got some really interesting stories.
Unplug the thing coming from the wall. Leave it unplugged for 10 minutes, and then plug it back in. Otherwise, this damn alarm is going to keep going off.
Great knife story.
Okay. Okay, we're back. Okay, where do we want to start chronologically?
We did talk about two things that were wanting to be covered. I know that we highlighted. One, I thought we were going to maybe talk about training group that you had posted about looking through all your stuff, and then also your Fairburn sites that you ended up finding or getting,
which is part of training group. Okay, so the training for us.
And before you start, we will end up doing an entire special on training group because Terry has a ton of photos and I have a ton of photos from Bob Bechtold and other gentlemen who are in this training group. And I apologize, we don't have photos for today due to internet issues, but I will have photos for the next time Terry comes on.
Okay. So, training group in today's world is so completely different. They don't even call it training group anymore. They call it the Q course. In my day, it was called training group. So you get there from jump school, you come up from Fort Benning on a bus, they assign you to a company and you get a room and all this shit. And we were lucky because our barracks were the brand new, 2 to 3 year old, 3-story brick buildings. So we had all the creature comforts, heating and air conditioning, all that good stuff. So you start your training, and most of the training was in classrooms over on Smoke Bomb Hill in these old World War II buildings, the old wooden buildings. And you go to class. After class in the evenings, you may play flag football or whatever. And that was in January. I got to Fort Bragg at jump school was the first 3 weeks of January. So at the end of January of 68. So you go through phase 1, and part of that is after a few weeks of training, like on map reading and a lot of the basic patrol skills and stuff, you go out to this place called Camp McCall, which they still use, which my understanding is in World War II, it was an air base because there's old abandoned runways and stuff out there. Anyway, then you'd go out to the field for a week, learning patrol maneuvers and all kinds of stuff. So then Bud mentioned the Fairburn Sykes knife. So if you're familiar with the World War II 1st Special Service Force, the knife they used was called a Fairburn Sykes. It was the metal handle that had like rings around it for a grip. and it had the dagger-shaped blade. I found one of those just laying out in the woods. Some poor fool lost it, and I didn't take it to Vietnam with me, but I had that knife until probably around 1990, and it mysteriously disappeared, and I have no doubt that my ex-wife's son stole it, but I had it all that time. But it was typical, like I said earlier, about the guys going to the PX and buying the Gerber, which was, to me, another version of that knife. But I had an original, and it really pissed me off to lose it. So you go through phase one. You come back from the field, and if you're blessed to be passed on, then you start your MOS training. And my MOS training, I wanted to be weapons, because I grew up with guns and in the woods and stuff. So you got 8 weeks of light weapons, and then 8 weeks of heavy weapons, which would be like the machine guns and the mortars and recoilless rifles and all that. And the final test in the light weapons class was they took, I'm trying to remember how many, I think it was either 4 or 5 weapons from different countries. They would completely disassemble them, throw all the parts in a box, and you had so much time to put them back together in working order. And that was your final test for light weapons class. I flunked heavy weapons, so they recycled me for another 8 weeks of heavy weapons. Then you go to what they called, at that time, we called phase 2, which was more detailed stuff. And that culminated, well, I'll tell it because we'll get into it later. One night after class in phase 2. So we were getting pretty near the end, and instructors were starting to loosen up, and you could actually sit around and visit with them sometimes after class. And one time the question was asked to this instructor, and he's very, very well-known name that I'm not, so I won't mention it, but we're like, what is this secret stuff, this secret organization we keep hearing about over that's doing really secret squirrel stuff? And he's like, if you go to Vietnam, you'll have an opportunity to find out. Just when they say, do you want to volunteer for something secret, raise your hand, and you'll find out what it's all about. But it's so secret, I can't tell you any. But that's how the attitude was then. Man, this is secret shit. You don't talk about it. So anyway, the final thing for graduation from phase 2 is you jump into the Wari National Forest or the Pisgah National Forest up in the mountains of North Carolina, and you play war for, I don't know, 10 days or something, 2 weeks, whatever. And it's really cool. They still do it today, and the populace, the civilians who live up there, they get real involved with helping out. I don't know if the government pays them or what. I suspect that they probably do. But like, for instance, we were supposed to go from point A to point B, or we had a target, and we stopped at this house. The lady, every one of us, and it's a team, so there's like 10 or 12 of us. The lady washed all our clothes. They cooked a big old meal for us. And, and then we leave, and then we go do our next thing that we're supposed to do. And the notable thing about phase 2 was when we jumped in that night, because you're jumping in at night with full combat gear and all that shit, because you're going to be out there for 2 weeks. I'm the first one, because my last name, for some reason, it seemed like most of the time I jumped, I was the first guy in the door. And when you're the first one in the door, they put you in the door, and you're in there for about 20 minutes while that C-130 or whatever plane you're in is circling around, and they throw the crepe paper streamers out to see what the wind is like. And you're doing all that, and you're standing there at the door, and the adrenaline is just going. And all of a sudden, we start seeing all this lightning, and there's 2 engines on each wing of the C-130. Well, all of a sudden, a bolt of lightning comes down, and it hits the engine right outside the door where I'm standing, to the engine closest to the fuselage of the plane, and the engine bursts into flames.
Oh.
Well, I didn't know it at the time, but they had sprinkler systems built in. So it immediately put the fire out, but the jump master then is yelling, "Jump, jump, jump." So we're all jumping, and we had guys, unfortunately. I know one guy landed in a tree and broke his back. Another guy landed in a creek bed and broke his leg. Another guy came down at about a 45-degree angle and slammed into a barbed wire fence. Shit. And we learned later that the colonel that made the decision for us to jump ended up getting relieved at command. And that's as much as I know about it, because, we went to the woods and we were gone for a couple of weeks. You come back, and I think we had maybe another few days or so of classes to wrap it up. And we had heard stories, which is a story for another time. I think there's going to be a whole story done on it. But we knew there was a lady up in the Pentagon named Mrs. Billy Alexander. Everybody called her Mrs. A. And she was responsible for all Special Forces assignments worldwide. If you wanted to go somewhere in particular, we were told you send her a dozen roses, tell her what you want, and by God, you'll get it. Within a week or two, you'll have your orders. So there was 11 of us who got together, and we had a dozen roses delivered with a list of our names and serial numbers and all that. Told her we wanted to go to 5th Group. The day came when they read out orders, and every one of us got our orders for Vietnam. So that's how we go to Vietnam. So then another question that's been asked a lot is, well, if SOG was so secret, yeah, they do have professional contractors as part of it, yeah, to play the bad guys. They used to draw, when we were doing it, the guys that would play the enemy troops, they'd pull them from all over the post, from different units and stuff. And most of our cadre at training group were all Vietnam veterans.
Some SOG vets.
Yeah, some SOG vets, but you would never know it because they didn't talk about it. So anyway, a question that's been asked quite a bit is, well, if SOG was so secret, how did you even know about it to get into it? So what happened was, you go to Vietnam, you got orders for 5th Group. So they send you up to 5th Group on a plane. You get to 5th Group, you spend a week filling sandbags. And as bad as that sounds, the whole purpose of it was to quickly get you acclimated to the heat and the humidity. Then you spend a week out on this island doing things like I got picked, just randomly picked to demonstrate the McGuire rig, how to get pulled out of the jungle on a rope. So that was pretty cool, got to get pulled out. So you spend that week out there and you do a patrol at night and all this stuff. You go back to 5th Group, and then the Sergeant Major, I'll never forget him, Command Sergeant Major Myron J. Bowser. He comes in and he says, okay, guys, you're ready to go to your ultimate destinations. And he says, I have an opportunity to offer you a chance to go somewhere that's so secret I can't tell you what it is, what you'd be doing, or anything else. But if the challenge sounds like something that's up your alley, raise your hand, and then we'll go to the next step. So 9 out of the 11 of us raised our hands. And I can't remember if all 9 of us got sent to Da Nang, to CCN, but most of us did. So we get up to CCN, and again, what the hell is CCN? And they put us in barracks that are some of the rooms that had been blown up by the sappers on August 23rd. So this was like towards the end of October of '68. So, you know, you're in a room that's got bullet holes and it's got chunks out of the floor and all that. And maybe guys got killed in those rooms. Anyway, you get called into this room, got curtains on it and everything, and there's this big curtain on the wall. And so the commander comes in, says, "Gentlemen, you've all volunteered for this special operation. It's so secret. I have to give you one last opportunity to back out. If you don't think it's for you, now's your chance, and we'll send you back to 5th Group, and you'll be sent maybe to an A camp or whatever." And we all stayed.
You didn't have any second thoughts whatsoever about it.
Oh, hell no. When you're just turned 20 years old and you got a chance to do something so secret that nobody will talk about it, you're going to do it, you know.
Hell yeah.
And we're all similar, in a similar boat. So he pulls he says, "First you got to sign this document, and it's a non-disclosure. You won't talk about it for 20 years. And if you do, you go to Leavenworth for 20 years. So that was to scare us. And so we all sign it. And then he pulls back the curtain on the wall and he says, "Our mission is to conduct reconnaissance in Laos, Cambodia, North Vietnam, and possibly other places."
Ooh.
So he's showing us on the map that there's different camps, or at that time called FOBs. And so we all get done with that, and we're just waiting on where we're going to go. And I was sent to Khartoum. So I get to Khartoum, process in, go draw all my gear at S4. And then they said, "You're going to the yard camp, and a Jeep will be here to pick you up in just a minute." Jeep comes, picks me up, takes me about 3 or 4 miles down the road to the yard camp, which was an old A camp. And CCC took it over because they didn't physically have room at the main FOB for 2 hatchet forces. So we had our own little piece of heaven down the road, away from all the spit and polish and all that.
Away from the flagpole.
Right. So that, in a nutshell, that's how you got into SOG. Also, when I got to Khartoum, I was not given a choice. Do you want to do recon or hatchet force? I had no idea what hatchet force was. I mean, recon is recon. You know what that means. So I was just assigned to the hatchet force. And as I found out once I got up there, that they'd had a lot of casualties and they had empty spots to fill. They needed warm bodies. I probably wasn't there 3 weeks, and I went on my first mission, which was what they called a SLAM mission, stood for Search, Locate, Annihilate, and Mutilate. Not mutilate, monitor.
Monitor.
You know, well,
that's what you changed it to.
We changed it to mutilate because we thought it was funny, but you know. So immediately I start training and deciding my gear layout and how I wanted to arrange everything on my gear. And next thing I know, you're going on a SLAM. So they explained to me what a SLAM is and that we do them a couple of times a year. You're going into Hotel 9. Well, what's Hotel 9? Said, "Well, you're a cherry. You'll find out. I guarantee you that you will get your CIB on that mission." Well, right away, that says So you're guaranteeing me that we're going to be in combat. And they said, well, it's Hotel 9. You don't go in Hotel 9 without being in combat. So we went in, and they sent both companies, Company A, I was in Company B. They sent both companies in. So we're moving along this ridge top, and I was with Captain Ron Goulet and Lieutenant Jim Jerson, who are both KIAs eventually. There were 7 of us in the point element, and we go down the mountain, and everybody's strung out behind us. I mean, you got 200 men. We go down the bottom of the hill, and there's a stream running, so we fill our canteens, and we know we're going up the next hill. Well, shit, the next hill's got steps cut into the side of the mountain all the way up to the top. So right away, oh, shit.
Bad news.
This ain't good. So we get to the top, and as we get on the top of the hill, everybody stops. And according to the map, if we went down the other side of the hill, we would cross the road, and there'd be this big open area. And the idea was we wanted to cross the open area and go up the next hill before nightfall. Because, it's always, the idea was you're always safer on top of a mountain than down in a hole. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't see anything because of the triple canopy jungle. So I said, why don't I take my gear off and I'll climb a tree and see if I can see out above the hillside and see if that open area is really there. Because the maps were not known for being 100% correct. So just as I unbuckled my pistol belt, some grenades or rifle grenades or whatever went off. It killed the 3 yards. We hit the ground. My rucksack, I took a round in the flash hider of my rifle, and the top of my rucksack was stitched with bullets. And Lieutenant Jerson and Captain Goulet were pinned down, and me and my interpreter, the other 3 yards were all dead. And my interpreter was right next to me, and he took rounds in his rucksack too. Thank God it didn't set off my C4. And what are you going to do, So I did what I thought was appropriate. I climbed over to the guys still coming up the hill, and they had taken some rifle grenades. So they had wounded, and I got an M79 and a bandolier of M79 rounds, and I climbed back up, and I started firing them just at a very, very slight angle, keeping in mind that the round's got to go 15 yards before it arms itself. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to fire it like a mortar and try to fire it just a hair off of straight up so it'll come down maybe 20, 30 yards away from us. So I did, and I fired a number of rounds, and end of story. The bad guys didn't go back to camp that night. I'll just say that.
This is guys. If y'all don't have the book yet, like I keep telling y'all, SOG Pontoon by Joe Parnar, you must get this book. Mr. Terry, is this not the same incident to where y'all get on top of the hill and y'all not only find one hell of a punji stake and gun?
Oh no, that's a different story.
Oh shit. No. Okay.
That was a month later.
Oh, okay.
Same area, Hotel 9, but that was about a month later. So anyway, they ended up, we're at the top of the hill, the Ho Chi Minh Trail's down at the bottom of the hill, and we're hearing trucks pull up all night long, and tailgates drop, so you know what's coming. And that's when I got introduced to Green Hornets, which all the medics carried Green Hornets. It was amphetamines to keep your ass awake all night. And when you got trucks just constantly pulling up and stopping. You don't want to go to sleep anyway, but
No.
the amphetamines kept you up. And we got pulled out the next day. And a couple of days later, Captain Goulet and Lieutenant Jerson came up to me at camp and said, we're writing you up for a Silver Star for what you did. Now, this is where young and stupid takes over. And I, being idealistic, because I come from a military family, and my comment was, I don't need no medal. I was just doing my job. And they're like, you earned it. We'd really like to do it, but if you're dead set against it, we won't do it. So I just said, looking back on it, what kind of fucking idiot were you anyway?
Yeah. Oh, God.
I mean, the Silver Star, it wouldn't get you a cup of coffee today, but it'd be nice to have on your resume.
Well, hell, no, it would back in the day. A Silver Star back then actually meant something.
It meant something, yeah. So anyway, that's that story. So let's see, where are we going now, bud? That was before that ever happened. So my first mission, that was Hotel 9. Then, and it's a story for another time and place because we're at an hour and a half already. And I have no time restraints, so you guys, I'm going to keep talking until somebody stops me.
Tell me what story you just said you wanted.
We go for it.
Tell me what story you wanted to say for another time.
Leghorn.
Leghorn, okay. Writing that down.
Leghorn, because there's a lot of interest about our radio relay site at Leghorn, and I had a Montagnard girlfriend the whole time I was over there. And we had a lieutenant. He was pissed off. He didn't like it that I had this Montagnard girlfriend. So by God, he's going to punish me. So we had a requirement every month. 2 Americans and a squad of Montagnards would go up to Leghorn to man the radio relay site. So I get told, okay, you're going up to Leghorn for the month. Okay, fine. I had no idea what I was in store for. Anyway, so that was the entire month of December of '68. I go back to camp January 1st, I guess, whatever. And it'll be another story if we have time today, otherwise later, but we Captain Goulet, and God love his soul, he was a great commander. Well, the decision was that we were going to start having on the first weekend of the month, every month, we were going to have a pig party. We called it a pig party. And me being the chief procurement officer, my job was to go to town and bring a couple of truckloads of ladies back for the weekend. So we started doing that, but again, that's a whole nother story.
That'll be for Tony when you and Tony are together.
Yeah, me and Tony Love, I'll go into more details. I've got a ton of pictures to prove it, and most of them pictures will never see the light of day to anybody but me.
Oh, God, no.
Because there's easily identifiable people in those pictures. But anyway, so then, I don't know, another week or two goes by, and, we're constantly training almost every day. We're down on the range practicing immediate action drills and that. Well, then it comes time to go back into Hotel 9. And this is where Bud started talking. We're coming down off the mountain, and it's the only time I ever saw, I ever heard of, and I've never heard anybody else talk about seeing any kind of enemy booby traps over in Laos, because they'd be booby trapping their own people. But we found this big punji pit at the base of the hill. And this story is in Joe Parner's book too, but not everybody's going to read the book. So we get down onto the trail, and then Captain Goulet decided we were going to walk the trail for a little while. And for the guys again, unfortunately, we don't have my pictures available right now. But if when you talk about the trail, depending on where you were at on the trail, it may be wide enough for a semi to go down. It may only be wide enough for a deuce and a half or pickup truck or something. And it was just a dirt road, a series of dirt roads or trails or whatever. So I was bringing up the rear, and right on the edge of the road, I see this object laying there. It's got kind of like, it's cast iron, and it's got like nubs all over it and all that. Well, like an idiot, I pick it up and I carry it to Captain Goulet, and I said, "What is this?" And he said, "That's a CBU round that didn't go off. Get the fuck out of here and get rid of it before you kill us all." So I go back down the road and I underhand tossed it as far as I could, and when it hit, it went off. Scared the living shit out of me. Don't ever pick shit up that you find laying around in the jungle, because there's so much unexploded ordnance. I mean, you know, you just don't pick the stuff up. So anyway, that night we got our asses kicked again, because it's Hotel 9. I mean, it wouldn't be Hotel 9 if you didn't. And the next day, when they pulled us out, we start taking anti-aircraft fire, and we're going over an area, you can see bad guys running around on the ground down there and all that. And all of a sudden, there's all these black puffs of smoke all around us. And the door gunner leans over to me and yells, "Anti-aircraft fire." I'm like, oh shit, we're going to get shot down. All of a sudden, you hear, kind of like if you can hear my alarm system going off in the background, you hear this klaxon horn going off. When that horn goes off, that means that your aircraft is fixing to go down. You've lost power and you're going down. What I didn't know, again, I had never been shot down, so what I didn't know, that the Hueys were designed so if they lose the engine or the transmission, they would go into auto rotation. Auto rotation is like a giant spiral, and so they just keep spiraling downward, losing attitude with each turn of the spiral. The problem is, when you finally hit the ground, you're going forward and you slam in. So some of my surgeries have been because of this, because you're sitting on that hard aluminum floor of the Huey. So when you hit, your hips and your lower back take all the impact. And I think that's what led to both of my hips having to be replaced. But I also broke my back and didn't know it. So they had me plant some C4 around the dash of the chopper. We get on the chase ship, which was an extra helicopter for this very thing. If a chopper got shot down, they could come in and pick you up and get you out of there. And I got to watch the Cobras come in and blow that chopper up, because it was still in Laos, so there was no sending another chopper to lift it out and, you know, get it fixed and all that. So, yeah. Yeah.
I can't believe you. I can't believe you picked that damn CBU up and took it to Goulet. I bet he shit his pants.
I can't believe I did it either. And again, that comes from lack of experience. And I mean, hell, I didn't even know what a CBU round looked like.
And
so,
and also,
you know,
and also just to let people know, Captain Goulet also had a mess up himself. He went to throw a grenade and threw it dead into a tree, and it rolled back into y'all and damn near blew all of y'all up. So he had a little boo-boo himself on that operation.
Yeah. You know, when you're in the jungle and, you know, sometimes stuff doesn't go as far as you want it to go. And I'll tell that story. I think I'm leading to that story next, about when I got shot the first time and throwing a grenade. Okay, so that was my 2 times in Hotel 9. Don't ever want to go back. Somebody had asked a question and we didn't talk about it yet, but what are the areas that you least wanted to go into? Hotel 9 was one of them. The other one was up further north, mostly CCN, but it was called Oscar 8.
Oh, yeah.
That was even worse than Hotel 9. My buddy and roommate was killed in Oscar 8 while I was coming back from my extension leave. They went up there to help CCN. So anyway, so that's January. February, hell, I don't know what we did. I don't know what the mission was in February. So then in March, we'd had a lot of casualties, and we had a lot of casualties, and so we hired a bunch of new guys. Well, I believe it was March 17th of '69. Mm-hmm. I had which I still have, a reel-to-reel tape deck and a transistor radio, and I was recording music off of Armed Forces Vietnam Radio Network. And I think I was recording Joe Cocker. And all of a sudden I heard boom, boom. And I knew right away that it was mortar rounds. So I yelled, and it wasn't ours. So I yelled incoming, and everybody scattered that was out in our little club. The first round hit over the poker table. The second round hit over the bar. Third round hit in the men's American shower where the first sergeant was taking a shower. So you can't tell me that these guys had not walked off the distances to everything in the camp. So the next night it started again, only this time they decided the VC, it was mainly VC, I think local VC, they decided that they were going to overrun our camp. Bad mistake, boys. Bad mistake. My job was, I was a floater, which meant that I was supposed to go anywhere around our perimeter on the wall where they needed me. So the first thing that happened is a round went off and our medic, Ron Brown, took an injury to his leg. He took some shrapnel in his leg. So I helped him get to the dispensary. Then we had to deliver a baby. And then I get back out and I'm roaming around the wall. And I saw something I really don't care to ever see again, but they were coming through the wire. They had sappers and Bangalore torpedoes and all that shit. And on the backside of our camp, if you went back, I don't know, half a mile or so past our range was a mountain. And there were hilltops scattered around. They were coming through the wire, and in one of the corner bunkers, one of the guys was working the 50, and I got up there to try to help him out. And this Viet Cong sapper took a 50 caliber tracer round. Now, keep in mind, those tracer rounds burn at about 10,000 degrees. He took a tracer round to the chest. So if you can imagine, and he kept coming.
God.
Which I'll tell you why in a second. He keeps coming, and that 50 cal stopped him. I mean, the guy was dead. The guy was dead, obviously, but the body just kept coming, and so the 50 just shredded him. So anyway, we broke the attack, and there's a lot more to the story, but we're going to run out of time. So the next morning, we went out and did a sweep around the camp,
Oh,
And
whoa! I was about to say you're skipping some of the good parts. You before you get to
oh,
that, you need to mention Mr. Alan Farrell. What the hell's going on with him this whole time? You think he's dead?
well, we didn't know. Alan Farrell and Michael Seibel, another buddy, they took a patrol out to try to determine like how many bad guys were out there, what the hell's going on around the camp, and all that. And we couldn't make contact with them. And then we sent another team out to try to find them, and they found them. Well, the reason they couldn't make contact with us is because they were trapped in an abandoned building, a house, and the bad guys were all around them. And so they couldn't talk on the radio. And and there's more of that story in Joe Parnar's book.
Oh yeah.
So the next day we go out and do a sweep, and again, I donated. We found all kinds of what turned out to be counterfeit Vietnamese currency, all kinds of small packets of aluminum foil. And you got to remember, I'm 20 years old. I don't do drugs, never did drugs, never will do drugs. And I had no idea what those foil packets were. And then we found trees that had all the bark worn off of them. So what had happened was the VC grabbed locals and they hopped them up on heroin, and that's what those foil packets were. They got them high on heroin, they chained them to the trees, and they had them working the mortars. So they couldn't run off. And we found blood and bandages everywhere. All the bodies that we found were up in the wire close around the camp. So that was the attack on the yard camp in a nutshell. Then what? Go ahead.
I mean, guys, like you said, there's so much more in the book. I mean, Mr. Terry's talking about going around, which is vividly spoken about in the book, written about in the book. But Terry and Alan and Mr. Bob Grun walk around the camp and are seeing just the utter devastation, and are noticing how many B-40s are around, how many Bangalore torpedoes. It's unbelievable what they threw at the guys, and they repulsed back. You need to get this book to see about them.
Bud has a picture of me holding one of the RPGs, the B-40s, that we picked up. So fast forward about, let's see, that was around the 17th or 18th, the 25th of March, same month. So the next day, after they tried to overrun the camp, we're out there cleaning stuff up and doing all that. And I see one of our new recruits, this Montagnard, and it looks to me like he's pacing things off. So I grabbed him by the collar, and he had a pencil sticking in his pocket, and I looked in his pocket, and he had a piece of paper, and he was marking off the steps from our generator, our water tower, the dispensary, and all that, and he was walking all that off to give to the bad guys so they could adjust their mortar rounds.
Boy, that had to be shocking.
It was no surprise, because how else would they have been so accurate when they first initially hit us?
Well, I mean, one of your own were going to get all of y'all killed, and even his other yard brothers had to be. I mean, I'm no surprised that they had it marked off, but to be betrayed in such a manner. Yeah,
so I grabbed him and took him to our flagpole, which was some concrete, like 2 or 3 steps, and then a flat base where the flagpole was. And Captain Goulet and all the guys came out to see what the hell's going on. And All I know is, and all I want to know is that they took him down to the FOB, and I don't know what happened from there. I don't know if they turned him over to the Vietnamese police. I don't know what they did with him. And I don't really care, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, a few days later, it was March 25th, and you may or may not see the humor or the coincidence in this, but the next day, March 26th, had a real significance personally to me because I was madly in love with this girl in my senior year of high school, and she was Jewish and I wasn't. And on March 26th of 1966, she called me and her parents forced her to break up with me because I wasn't Jewish. And it took me, I'll tell you what, it took me until I met my current wife 28 years ago. It took me that long to really get over her. But anyway, so we were told, and this goes into locating stuff and how did you go about locating stuff. A recon team had found what they believed to be a truck park on the trail. So what do? They let Hatchet Force do what Hatchet Force does. So we went in on the 25th, and that night, again, we're up there on the hilltop above the road. Now, we weren't positive that we were right there at the truck stop, but it turned out we were. And all night long, we're hearing trucks come down the trail. They stop. You hear voices and all this other stuff. And what they were doing was refueling. So the next morning, we get our breakfast out of the way and all that. We come down off the hill, and we no sooner hit the trail than the shooting started off to my right. So I was on the left side of everything. So I thought, well, I'm going to take my guys and do a wheeling maneuver and kind of, sweep around and maybe come in behind or alongside of whoever's shooting at us and surprise them. So we step off the road into the woods, and we no sooner get off the road, I mean literally like 2 or 3 steps, and this NVA pops up about, I'm going to say 30 feet in front of me, maybe 40 feet in front of me. And just as he raised his SKS and fired, a law rocket went off. One of our guys, John Holan, fired a law rocket at this huge bunker. Well, I felt something hit my left ankle, and I thought it was a piece of shrapnel. Of course, I wasn't thinking straight because it was on the side of my left ankle, and the rocket went off over on the right of me. Anyway, I rolled and came up on one knee, and I fired as this guy was getting ready to fire again. I fired first, and he never fired. And then he holds his rifle out, and he looks at it, and he throws it down. More on that in a second. And he takes off into the woods. So I grab a grenade. At that time, so I've been there, let's see, November, December, January, February, 5 months. I still didn't carry a backup weapon, So I throw a grenade. Well, like we were talking about the M79s having to go 15 yards at a time, when you're in the bamboo and all this shit. The grenade, of course, hits the trees and bounces back and goes off over us, and we all get showered with shrapnel. Nobody got hurt. So then what am I going to do? So I grab my knife, my little Air Force survival knife, and I start to go after him. And when I step down on my left leg, my leg went out from under me. Okay, fine. So then I hear some more gunfire over there and all that. And then I hear Captain Goulet yell, ceasefire, ceasefire. So I go sit down on the end of the trail. So when I say sit down on the edge of the trail was sunken into the ground, maybe about 2 feet. So sitting on the edge was kind of like sitting on a bench, And I thought, well, shit, if shrapnel hit me, I need to take my boot off and see what's going on. So I take my boot off. I don't see anything visibly, so I take my sock off. And in the very front of my ankle, I see a hole about the size of a pencil. There's no blood. I see a hole in my sock. I see a hole in my boot. There's no blood at all, none whatsoever, not even a drop. And then I start looking at my ankle, and you can see the outline of a bullet up against my ankle bone. So I'm like, oh, shit. So I call out that I've been shot. And like I was saying earlier, we all carried 3 little syrettes of morphine in our pocket. So I sat there for about 10 minutes building up the nerve to stick the morphine in my leg. And once I did, and it kicked in, and it kicks in very quickly, I was able to get up. I was able to get up and take pictures, and that's why I have all the pictures of this incident. I have pictures of the guy who shot me. I have a frame out in the workshop, which Bud has seen on Bud TV here. I have the rest of the bullets out of his gun in a little shadow box. And I had his rifle. I had the rifle. Well, the reason he didn't fire the second shot and he threw his rifle down is because I was such a damn good shot that my shot, he's up like this to fire, and my bullet hit the bolt of his SKS. Woof. Yeah, crazy. So anyway,
go ahead, sir.
You've got pictures. There's pictures of me holding the rifle.
Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. When we have you back on again, all of these photos you're speaking about will be shown so the new viewers can see them, because you that morphine definitely got you into the shutterbug mood.
Yeah, and then we had this lieutenant, and it happened to be the lieutenant that didn't like me. He was, I'll just say he did not survive this incident. Anyway, so we had to clear an LZ in the middle of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and a King Bee came in and picked up me and his body and took us back to Dak To. And on the way back, again, I think these are pictures that would be very interesting to everybody. I was able to take some really good pictures of what the Ho Chi Minh Trail and all the bomb craters around it look like from 3,000 feet in the air. Got some really good pictures of that.
All of these, the bunker, the body that the bunker's laying in, you're what y'all are kind of sitting around to where the bunker was. It really gives a great view of what y'all were traveling through, and how you could literally just walk up upon the best concealed bunker, and they just annihilate y'all. It's amazing.
And the one other observation, and actually I saw him, but Vernon Ward will be able to talk about. He saw the entire stacks of them. I didn't see the stacks. I just saw 1 or 2 on the ground. 55-gallon fuel drums.
Yeah.
Shell Oil Company. Red and yellow Shell Oil Company on them. Pissed us off to no end that we've got an American company, and and of course they didn't know that they were coming to Vietnam, but the NBA, the North Vietnamese, were buying them somewhere and then shipping them into Cambodia and probably trucking them up the trail to supply all these refueling stations. We didn't get any trucks, so.
I was glad that you mentioned, because I didn't find out till recently that Mr. Vern Ward was with you, and I didn't know that he had saw stacks. I remember you saying you saw Shell Oil, but I didn't remember you saying that he found all of the containers and all of that.
I didn't know that he saw them until last year when I was at the 5th group reunion, and he and I hadn't seen each other in 50 50 years. And we got to talking about it, and he says, yeah. He says there was a whole wall of these 55-gallon drums. Anyway, there's good pictures. So we go back to
that's
Doc
Lima
Toe.
6 now. And remember, this is people asking about bad places. You definitely don't like Lima 6 because you got shot in Lima 6.
Yeah, that's the first time I got shot. Then we get to Doc Toe, and they said, well, you're not injured bad enough. We're not going to pull a chopper off of supporting other teams. You can wait until we go back to the FOB at 5 o'clock. Oh, thanks, guys. So I shot up with another shot of morphine, and I was good. I had no pain. And 5 o'clock comes, they shut down the launch site and go back to Khartoum. So I get back to Khartoum. They take me off the chopper and take me to the dispensary. And the head medic there, Joe Parner, tells me that his name was Joe Maggio.
Lou Maggio.
Lou Maggio. Honestly, I don't remember. But anyway, they's like, well, you're going to get a vacation for a while. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, oh, they'll send you to Japan. It's like, fuck, I don't want to go to Japan. I want to stay here. And I said, I begged and pleaded with them to take the bullet out because I know our medics were, and especially this bullet was right under the skin. So I said, you guys can take this out. No, we can't risk the infection and all that. You're going. So what they did was they loaded me in a Jeep. They took me back up to the yard camp. I got to spend the night at the yard camp with my girlfriend, and I was able to pack a bag. And the next morning, they had a chopper pick me up at the camp and take me down to Pleiku to the hospital. To me, this is where the story starts. I find the humor in it from this point on. So I get to the hospital, and you got a toe tag that way if you're dead or something, they know who you are, blah, 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 and all this stuff. So my toe tag where it says location or where you were at, basically, when you got injured, mine says classified.
Oh, wow.
So I got this doctor leaning over me saying, well, this says classified. He says, were you in Laos? And I said, it's none of your fucking business. It says classified. So, okay, are you allergic to any drugs? And I said, yes, I'm allergic to pentothal. Well, pentothal is what? It was used as truth serum. But it was also the military, and even in civilian hospitals, they use pentothal as an anesthesia. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I was allergic to it because when I was 8 years old and I had appendicitis, when I was coming out of it in the recovery room, I kicked a nurse in the stomach so hard she had to have surgery. So they told me, they said, you're allergic to pentothal. Don't ever let them use it on you again or you'll hurt somebody. So I told them, I said, I'm allergic. Well, how do you know you're allergic? And I told them the story. And I said, well, what happens? I said, well, when I start coming out of it, I get violent and I could hurt somebody. My nickname from high school, when I was wrestling in high school, was Superman. And it wasn't Superman for no reason. Yeah. So anyway, they put me out, take the bullet out. Now, they don't sew you back up. They just pack it with gauze. And the reason they do that is because if they sewed you up, because of the heat and humidity and all that over in Vietnam, there was too much danger of an infection getting in there, and that could kill you. So that's why they're going to send me to Japan in a couple of days. So all I remember is coming to, and they got me strapped on a gurney, waiting to get me to a room. And this guy is leaning over me again, asking me, were you in Laos? And all I remember is I got my left arm out, I took out 3 of his teeth, knocked him out cold, and tipped my gurney over. Yeah.
Oh.
And I told the nurse, I said, I told you I was allergic to pentothal and I'd get violent. I said, ain't my fault.
That's what you get.
So they put me in a room, and somebody screwed up, and they didn't put me on the manifest to put me on a plane to go to Japan. And so it was going to be another day or two or whatever. So one of the guys, and this goes back to when I got shot, the team stayed in, and that night they got hit really, really hard. And one of the guys, Vern, my buddy Vern Ward got wounded too, but one of the guys, John Holen, ended up with a sucking chest wound. And that was all I knew, because, then they send me off to the hospital. John actually came to visit me the next day to see how I was doing. And I'm thinking, what a class act. This guy's got a damn chest wound, and he's coming to see how I am doing with a minor little ankle wound. I just thought that was really a class act. Anyway, they said, would you like to call home? I'm like, well, shit, I guess so, yeah. So they had some kind of system where they kind of like relayed the phone call through like ham radio operators back to the States and all that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I give them a phone number and from my mom's house, and they call and they get her on the phone, and she said, where are you? And I said, I'm in the hospital. And they cut in and said, you're not allowed to discuss that. Well, that, of course, that just freaks my mom out and even more. And she said, I had a dream the other night. And by the other night, she later told me it was the night before I got shot. She said, I dreamed that you got shot in the left leg. And I was able to say, yep, before they interrupted me and said, you cannot disclose that. So my mom and I both had the same dream the night before it happened. I mean, how weird is that?
Anyway, that's always been one of the weirder incidents that you tell me. That is so wild. Both you and your mother.
Yeah, I mean, we're 10,000 miles apart, and we both have the same dream the same night. And not only just a dream that I got shot, or I was going to get shot, but also the same leg.
The exact leg. Exactly.
I mean, what the hell? So the story gets even better. So I was supposed to go to Tokyo on R&R the following week. Now, why I chose to go to Tokyo instead of like Australia or Taiwan or somewhere, one of my best buddies from high school was stationed in Tokyo. And all I knew, he would never tell me. He went to Vietnam, and he was home on leave, coming home from Vietnam, going to Japan, while I was home on leave going to Vietnam. And all he would ever tell me is that he was in communications. So I'm thinking, okay, so you're a pansy ass. Go do your radio shit, and I'll go take a bullet for you. So I was going to go to Tokyo on R&R. Well, I end up in Tokyo, out on the outskirts of Tokyo, in the hospital. So the next day, they take me into surgery and sew me up and put me in a cast up to my knee with a rubber thing on the bottom of the cast. They called it a walking cast, so I could at least walk with crutches. The next day, 5:30 in the afternoon, I hear this voice. You ready to go? And immediately I recognized my buddy's voice, and I said, what the fuck? How did you know I'm here? He said, come on, get ready, let's go. I'm like, he said, I'll tell you when we get outside. So I get dressed, and
who is it?
The nurse, huh?
Who is it? Who's picking you up?
My best friend.
Which
it's my best buddy from high school that I was supposed to go visit this week on R&R, and here he is. He knows where I'm at, number one, because I wasn't able to get a hold of him and tell him, we didn't have cell phones or anything. So he's like, come on, let's go. He said, the girls are waiting. And I'm like, what? He said, my car's outside. So anyway, I get dressed and the nurse is like, what are you doing? And I said, well, my best friend is here to pick me up and we're going out on the town. She said, you know, you could get court-martialed for that. Now, you got to understand our mentality. In SOG, we didn't give a shit. Threaten us with whatever you want. Article 15, you know, what are you going to do? Send me to Vietnam? I'm already in Vietnam, you know. So anyway, she said, look, just don't stay out too late or I'm going to get in trouble. So anyway, he's got a car. He's got a girlfriend. She's got a girlfriend. And I spent the next 3 weeks, 5:30 comes, I'm outside and we're going to town. And
wow.
So I asked him, I said, how did you know where I was at and that I was in a hospital? And he came clean. He said, I'm in a top secret communications unit and we relay the traffic from MACV headquarters in Saigon back to the White House. And we relay all that traffic. So when you got shot in Laos, so I know you got shot in Laos, she said, you know, he said, we sent that information back to the White House. And then I find out later that the NVA claimed that they had proof that there was Americans in Laos and it caused them to walk out of the Paris peace talks. Okay, fine, whatever. Anyway, so there's 3 weeks of, again, it's one of those funny stories. Who would believe, you know, that 3 weeks riding around in a car got to ride the bullet train. You know, standing up in rush hour, you're packed in this train like sardines, doing 120 miles an hour. It was cooler than hell. So we had a lot of fun. So then, and Bud kind of saw this, and I'll hold it up, but just to, again, show what you got. When it came time to get out of the hospital, they call you into this room and they say, well, it's time for you to go back. What do you want to do? I said, I want to go back to Vietnam. So I kind of pilfered this out of my personnel file, and you see how long it is. And all it is saying, in accordance with Army regulations, you've been counseled on this date, blah, blah, blah. You're fully eligible to go back to Vietnam, or you can pick somewhere else to go. And they said, it's not on the form, but realistically, if you don't want to go back to Vietnam, the only other place for special forces would be going to Korea. And I'm like, shit, it's cold in Korea.
Yeah.
So I signed this form saying I wanted to go back to Vietnam. So they said, well, when you say you want to go back to Vietnam, you got to go see Dr. So-and-so, whoever the hell he is. So I go see Dr. So-and-so, and I said, so what are you? And he says, I'm the psychiatrist for the hospital. I said, why do I have to see a psychiatrist because I want to go back to Vietnam? He said, well, you've been shot and maybe you don't want to risk getting shot again or something. I just got to make sure that you're in your right mind. I couldn't say, well, I've been in SOG, so I may not be in my right mind. But anyway, he said, why do you want to go back? And I said, well, number one, I've only been there 6 months and it's a 13-month tour. And I plan on staying beyond that. And number two, I don't want to go to Korea because it's cold. I want to finish my tour in Vietnam. Okay. And he signs off on it. And that was a small piece of paper that went in my personnel file. I thought I had it, but I couldn't find it to show you. I mean, you know, the military gets so wrapped up in paperwork and bureaucracy and all this bullshit. Anyway, so it's time to go back to Vietnam. So I go back to Vietnam. You land at Cam Ranh Bay, and your orders just send you to this replacement battalion or depot or whatever. Well, then they cut orders, and they're going to send me to some outside of Special Forces unit. And it's like, that ain't happening. So I made my way. So I went AWOL. I made my way to the airport, and we had a fleet of our own private Air Force of C-130s. They were painted black and green with no markings, and they had the Fulton skyhook attachment on the front of them. So that's how you always knew they were ours. Yeah, we called them Blackbirds because they were black and green. They were flown by Filipino crews. And so I found a Blackbird and said, I need to get back to Nha Trang to 5th Group headquarters. And they're like, well, we're heading there in a few minutes. Bingo. So I get to Nha Trang. They pick you up at the airfield, take you back to 5th Group headquarters. So I went to see the Sergeant Major Bowser. And I said, this is what happened. He said they were going to send me outside of SF, and I just want to get back to SOG. And he said, oh, shit, not another one. So apparently this was fairly common, that they were trying to fill vacancies in other non-SF units, and our guys would come back from the hospital and they'd ship them somewhere else. And then it'd take them forever to try to get out of that unit and get back to SF. But he made sure, and I found a copy of the orders that canceled the original orders and assigned me back to 5th Group. And then they put me on a plane, sent me back to Khartoum. Well, the plane went to Pleiku. So I'm going to have to spend at least overnight before I could get somebody either to drive down from Khartoum to get me or hitch a ride on our choppers in the morning. And I don't know, I ran into somebody, and he was one of our Covey pilots. And he said, come on with me. And he takes me over to the officers club for the air cruise. So we had steak and lobster for supper that night.
Ooh.
and he put me up in his room. And the next morning we hopped on the OV-10 Bronco, which was the plane that had the propeller in the front and the one in the back. And on the way flying, so he would fly up to Khartoum. He would pick up the Covey rider, and then they'd go up to Docto or go out on a VR or whatever. But on the way from Pleiku to Khartoum, he said, you want to give it a shot? Okay. So I got to fly the OV-10 for a few minutes. And I was kind of nervous, though, because I didn't want to wreck the damn thing. So anyway, that's how I ended up getting back to Khartoum. So that was the end of April. So then in May, we get a mission. We're going into, and you got to remember the rainy season is just starting up. So we're going into Cambodia to help out CCS. And Cambodia had a lot of different rules and shit about aircraft and all. It was all political stuff. Anyway, so we go into Cambodia and we get reined in, and we're up above the clouds. The first layer, the lowest layer of clouds. There's several layers. And the aircraft couldn't see through the top layers of clouds to even see where we're at. So here we got trucks pulling up all hours of day and night. You can hear tailgates dropping, you hear voices. And we had we sent some guys out, and they ended up capturing a field telephone, complete with telephone wire and everything. So we could have our yards that could speak Vietnamese. They could listen in to the NVA communications, and the communications was that they were going to kick our asses in the morning, and that's why they're bringing all these troops in. Well, we got a break in the clouds, and we were able, to work some airstrikes on the road down there and blow up some trucks. They brought in a bulldozer. I mean, it wasn't 10 minutes later. They bring in a bulldozer, push all these blown up trucks off the road. We work another airstrike, blow up the bulldozer. An hour later, here comes another bulldozer and pushes the blown up bulldozer off the road. So you know we're in a really hot area, and we don't want to be there. So we're all dug in, and we're standing in water that's up over our ankles because it's been raining steady for 4 days, I guess. So we knew that there was a recon team that was only about a click away from us, and they had the same problem. They'd been out there for a week, and they were eating grass and stuff because they were out of rations. But we weren't able to get to them. So all of a sudden the shooting starts. So we're all in our foxholes, standing in water to our ankles, and we're shooting and all that shit. And my glasses fall off. So once the shooting's over with, I bend down. Well, first I go to wipe my forehead because it's all wet, and I'm thinking it's from the rain or sweat, and it's all blood. So my hand is all bloody. And then I pick up my glasses. Well, what had happened was the bullet came across and it took out the corner of my glasses and dug a little furrow right along the edge of my eyebrow down my head. I know that everybody says they can see it and all that shit. I can't see it, but that's what SF medics are for. So I had our medic take care of it, and I survived just fine. So that was May. So now I've been shot, 6 weeks, twice in 6 weeks or 7 weeks, whatever. So that was May. June, July, and August, I don't really remember our missions. That's why, people want me to write a book, and I don't want to write a book because, hell, there'd be big holes in it. Here's 3 months. I know we did missions, but I can't remember the specifics of them. September comes along. So wherever we're at, we're in a firefight, and I take a bullet right here in the side, and I've got a scar about, I don't know, it's about the size of a quarter, I guess. So once again, and that second one that got me in the head, I didn't even turn it in for a Purple Heart. I didn't care about that stuff. So this time I get shot in the side. Same thing. Medic does his magic, a few stitches and bandage, and I'm fine. I didn't turn it in. And lessons learned the hard way over the years when you start dealing with the VA is every time you get hurt, got to make sure it's in your records, because then when you go to try to get any disability or whatever, first thing they do is look in your records and say, well, there's no mention of it. So anyway, September, so I get hit in the side. October comes along, and we're training constantly, day in and day out. When October rolls around, I'm due to go home on extension leave, so I extended for another 6 months. So I'm due to go home. So a mission comes in, and I tried to go on it, but because I was going home, they're like, no, you've already got orders. A so-called North Vietnamese defector provided information to Saigon of where there was down to the coordinates of where there was a POW camp that held American Special Forces guys and pilots. So they're going to send my company in. So they all gear up, and the day that they left, I'm leaving the next day to go to Nha Trang and then to Saigon or wherever to get a plane to go home. So I'm there, and I'm listening on the radio, and I've got a 8mm movie that kind of haunts me because I was filming even though we weren't supposed to, I was filming as all these choppers. I mean, you can imagine for a whole company, 100 and some men, there's a lot of choppers. But this was a big deal because it was supposed to be a POW camp. And I've got one of the guys who I'll talk about in a minute. This was the very last time any picture or anything was taken of him. He's in the door of the chopper, and it's just kind of haunting because when they put him in on the target, it was a setup as usual. They were completely surrounded by concrete bunkers, machine guns, anti-aircraft weapons, all this shit. And I don't remember the exact count, but I think they lost 6 aircraft that day. 2 Americans, Captain Whalen, Fred Whalen, and Ronald Bozikas. Whalen was hit in the head with a RPG and, of course, killed instantly. And Bozikas took a burst from a machine gun or an AK, probably a machine gun, and he was killed immediately. I don't want to go into exactly what was used, but I was privy to some of the radio traffic. The team was told, the company, they were told to have their gas masks on at first light. And the approval for what was used came directly from the White House. I heard that on the radio, and it was flown up overnight from Hawaii. So at first light, they dropped whatever it was they dropped, and I'm not going to speculate because of tailwind. I don't want to get into that kind of stuff because I don't know the answer.
No.
But they got everybody out, the entire 100 and some men, without a single shot being fired.
Damn.
So I was at the chopper pad when the choppers came in, and I helped unload the wounded, and because we had a lot of wounded and dead. And then I had to leave to go get the flight in the Trang and go home. So when I got home, my mom picks me up at the airport, and she said, "Did you know Ronald Bozikas?" And I said, "Yeah, he got killed the other day on a mission that I would have been on if I wouldn't have been coming home." She said, "Well, his funeral is this afternoon at Resurrection Cemetery, which is a huge Catholic cemetery in St. Louis." So my cousin was at the house with his new Corvette convertible. So he said, "Well, let's go. I'll take you." So we go to the funeral, and I'm still in uniform, of course. So I met the family, and then they invite us over to the house after the funeral. And, of course, the father had ulterior motives. But come to find out that Bozikas had been writing letters home that are very, very specific about what we were doing. I mean, he was telling his folks in great detail what we were doing, and that shouldn't have happened. And his father tried to get me to, I wouldn't tell him anything, and I said, "It's classified," the usual stuff. And he spent the rest of his life trying to force the Army to change his son's records to say that he was killed in Laos rather than in a enemy-controlled area of Southeast Asia. What difference does it make? Your son's gone, But anyway, so coming back at the end of my 30-day leave, well, my cousin had this new Corvette convertible, so he takes me by this Chevy dealer, and they had this brand new metallic gold with a black top Corvette convertible on the lot. 1969 Corvette convertible, brand new, $4,650. So you know who bought a brand new metallic gold Corvette convertible. Yeah. So anyway, going back to Vietnam, I flew to Fort Lewis and then got the flight on to Vietnam. Well, at Fort Lewis, there was a delay of a couple of days on getting a flight. When I got back to camp on I think I got back, I was supposed to get back on the 1st or 2nd, and I think I got back on the 5th. I get back and come to find out my buddy Wayne Anderson, they sent my platoon into Oscar 8, the other place that nobody wants to go. I mean, nobody wants to go. And CCN had been shot up in Oscar 8 a couple of times. And so they sent one of our teams up there. And Wayne had been killed in Oscar 8. I kind of live with that every year on December 3rd. I drink a toast to him. Me and his best friend in civilian life, we commiserate, we kind of remember him just as because he was a great guy and we were friends. And let's see, that was December. January, another SLAM mission, and there was another couple of SLAM missions in between. But in January, it was another both companies SLAM, and the plan was to set up on hilltops on both sides of the Ho Chi Minh Trail to create a choke point where none of the convoys of North Vietnamese equipment could get through. And then the planes could bomb the hell out of them because they'd be backed up for miles. And that's what happened. And that was my last mission with the Hatchet Force, because we had a first sergeant and he and I didn't get along at all. He thought I was a smartass, and only because of the tone of my voice that it came across to him that I was a smartass. But he was an asshole anyway. So that was my last mission, but I had another 3 months to spend there. So they had me doing something else till it was time to go home. And I mean, that was my story about SOG.
Yeah, that's and we
got other questions that we've talked about, bud.
I mean,
but you've got them written down.
I've got them written down for when we can do another one, because like I said, we still got a week before we get hooked up.
Yeah.
So if you want to, we can. If you'd like to add anything else before we shut down, we can do one more before we get the computer and pictures and all that, where we can go hog wild with it.
Well, one of the things that I think most of us have been asked, and I addressed it earlier, but I don't have PTSD or anything because I've got a life, I got hobbies, whatever, and I keep myself busy. But when I came back for good, in that month that I was home on leave before I reported into Bragg, I was doing 2 cases of beer a day. So I had a gal that I met before I went to Vietnam when I was in training group, and I stayed in contact with her. And so when I came home, her family lived about 45 miles from Fort Bragg. So I got down to Fayetteville early, and I went down and spent a week with them. And they were farmers. I guess you call them sharecroppers because they worked for somebody else. And they'd go out in the fields at the crack of dawn and stay out there until they'd come in for lunch for a couple hours, and then they'd go back out. And at the time I was there, they were picking cucumbers. Guys, I'm going to tell you, that's some backbreaking work, because you're down on the ground and day after day picking acres and acres and acres of cucumbers. But that's how they made their living.
You got to twist them off just right. My grandmother used to put me in the fields.
So we're talking about the second week of May. Yeah, it'd be about the second week of May. And I went cold turkey, and of course, then I got assigned to 7th group, and I reported in, and then I started drinking again. But eventually, I don't drink now because thank you, Agent Orange, I've had cancer and I've had diabetes for 20 years and all these operations that I've had and all that shit. But
yeah, we've thank
drinking
goodness
was a huge problem.
I'm glad to
in
hear
general.
not only that you're admitting it for the other vets and for the vets from GWAT and all that, to see that you can be a heavy drinker and have your demons and you can overcome it and be successful and be happy in life like you are today, and still able to share and help us out.
When I got out of the Army, I shattered my right ankle at jump school and broke my back. 2 Januaries, 1 year apart, I break my back. So I broke it twice. And so before I got out, they finally decided that the only way to fix my ankle was to rebuild it. So October 16th, 1971, I went in the hospital. They rebuilt my ankle. That was on a Monday. On Friday, my father-in-law brought me back to the hospital with 106 fever. They gave me a shot of Demerol. They cut a window in the cast where on my right ankle, and they literally ripped open the incision that had been sewn up and started scraping the infection out with those big wooden Q-tips. And needless to say, I spent 3.5 months in the hospital. Here's another one of those weird stories you'll never hear. Somebody within the Army bureaucracy made a decision that if you were in the hospital for an extended stay and your doctor approved it, you could have up to a 6-pack of beer a day.
Oh, shit.
Really? You got guys that are drinking too much to start with, and we could have a 6-pack a day. So one night I decided, again, when they rebuilt me, I was in a full leg cast up to my balls, and they changed the dressing every day and all that. Well, one nurse would be responsible for like 30 or 40 patients. And like there was a guy in the bed next to me that had been in the hospital. He'd already been there 6 months and coded like 3 times because he rode his motorcycle up against a guardrail and took it down to the bone. But I decided that a cold beer sounded pretty good tonight. But the nurse was so busy, I called myself helping her out. I managed to get up and got crutches and went in the nurse's station to get a beer. Well, the fridge had a lock and key on it. And I didn't have any lock picking tools. But while I was in there, I thought, I'm going to see what's in my records. So I get my chart, and I'll never forget it till the day I die. The exact words were, patient sustained massive infection due to unsanitary conditions in operating room.
Oh, my God.
Yep. So the next time I saw my doctor, which was only like once a week, I cornered him and I said, what the hell's going on with this? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, does the words patient sustained, blah, 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 mean anything to you? And he said, where did you get that? And I said, it's in my chart in the nurse's station. Well, that chart's not for you. You're not supposed to see that stuff. I said, the point remains, I've seen it. I know it. What in the hell happened? And he's like, we don't know. He said it could have been one of the techs working in the operating room had a cold. It could have been an instrument that didn't get sterilized properly.
Dirty.
We'll never know. So I end up spending, but I got to go backwards. So when I got the infection, so my father-in-law brings me up on a Friday night. They immediately start giving me Keflex, which at that time was a very strong IV antibiotic. On Monday, they said, we're not having any luck killing the infection. So tomorrow morning, we're going to have to take you down and take your leg off at the knee.
Oh, Jesus.
I said, no, that ain't going to happen. So they leave. I make it to the nurse's station, and I get on the phone, and I call my company, and I let them know what's going on. And probably 2 hours later, I got a general and a colonel showing up, wanting to know what the fuck is going on. So they explain it all to them, and they leave. And they said, well, we ain't got no choice. We got to take your leg. So we're going to come get you at 7:30 in the morning, tomorrow morning. At 7 o'clock, 30 minutes before they're going to come get me, the fever breaks. So I didn't lose my leg. But I spent 3.5 months in the hospital, and one day they come to me and they said, because of your injury, you've lost a lot of the mobility in your ankle. You're never going to be fit for Special Forces duty anymore. So you need to start processing out. And that's how I ended up getting out of the Army. They kicked me out. And it took me 45 years of chipping away at the VA, one thing, then another thing, then another thing. And it took me till 2016 before I finally got 100%.
My God.
And well, I learned the hard way. Anytime you get injured, you got to put that shit in your records. You got to get it in your records.
Yeah.
Because that's what they rely on in making a decision, you know. And
man.
So,
yeah, those
anyway.
Purple Hearts and all that shit messed you up, but hindsight's 2020. So,
but
Jason,
you know,
yeah, we're gonna do a Miss A talk. We talked about that in the episode. We're all gonna do a Mrs. A episode as well.
Yeah,
people have been asking about that, but
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah,
so
you're gonna be a part of it.
Okay, I think it's obvious from what I've done now, maybe 20 hours worth of all these shows. They're not shows. I've changed the name of what this whole deal is. These are budcasts.
Budcasts. I like that.
They're budcasts. Anyway, you know, all of us guys, because, you know, you've told me there's certain guys that'll tell you some stories, but they don't want to come on camera. They don't want to do all this. That's too bad. But for me, it's never bothered me to talk about it. I mean, what the fuck? I volunteered for it. So, and as long as it's not classified, there are certain things. Bud doesn't know the stories, but he knows the fact. There are some stories that will never be told for various reasons. They don't need to be told. They're not going to be told. So you try to work, or you kind of dance around some of that, but you know,
yeah.
But for the most part, I mean, we've all got stories. I never joined the American Legion or the VFW because I viewed it as a bunch of old guys at 8 o'clock in the morning sitting in the bar getting drunk and talking about what a rough time they had being a cook or working in supply or something. And that's not you know, for years, I'm probably like a lot of us, because, you know, it's kind of part of the SF mentality. You know, we're the baddest motherfuckers on the planet. Now you look at us, we're all a bunch of broken down old men in wheelchairs and walkers and whatever. But, you know, we kind of, the culture, we look down on anybody that wasn't in SF. And finally, one day, I finally realized, I read an article, I don't know where it was, but I read an article that said for every man in combat, and this was years ago, from what I'm told currently, it's more people, but back then, the article said that for every man in combat, there's 10 people behind the scenes in support roles to make it possible for that one man to be in combat. And that completely changed my attitude about everything. You know, hey, at least you served. I don't care what you did. At least you served.
That's why I
you
don't
know.
understand these men that do stolen valor, and especially with SF or SOG and stuff. You find out they've served, and some of them may have actually had they've got their CIBs and maybe a Bronze Star or ARCOM or something, and yet they want to denigrate their service by trying to do something more that they weren't. Just be proud and happy you've gone out there and saw combat and served.
I actually worked with a lady. My career after I was a cop, and I got out of police work, I couldn't deal with the drunks because my brother became an alcoholic and all that. I just couldn't keep dealing with the drunks. But my career at the telephone company, I actually worked with a lady whose husband, you can find the stories of him on the internet, and he was one of these stolen valor guys. Oh, he was Green Beret, and he was doing this shit that's so secret that none of it's in his military records. And when I hear somebody say that, I just say, that's fucking bullshit, because
you immediately know.
It's in our records. It's in our records, And so these guys like him, and he actually, her boss, who was, he was a pansy ass desk jockey at the phone company, he was going to suspend her for something, and this son of a bitch actually threatened to kill him and his family. And I started doing some research on him, and I found all the stolen valor stories about him.
Wow.
So I actually knew one of these stolen valor guys, and his name, if anybody wants to look it up, his name was Ed Winsett, Winsett.
There's no short of them out there. I mean,
no, they're everywhere.
There's even men that were in SOG that want to claim recon and all of that I run across all the time, and want to be interviewed. And I will interview some, but the ones that have lied and say they're recon when they were just intelligence or at the headquarters, I won't give them the time of day. But I'm always open to interviewing intelligence, anything associated. So we've got a lot of good stuff coming up nonetheless.
Do we have any questions left
No,
today?
Everybody is just flabbergasted and shocked, or not shocked, but extremely happy with what we've had today.
Oh, well, good.
And we'll squeeze in another one, like I said, before the 25th, and do one more without pictures and all that, and that way we'll have a grand reopening and get to knock the doors off the hinges when I get the computer set up.
For the guys listening that are maybe newer to the podcasts, what we try to do is, like after this one, Bud and I will be talking, and because I need to get feedback to kind of gauge how I'm going to go, and we try to get Bud and Jason Holmes to get a lot of questions coming in before we do the next one, and then we sit down, like Bud and I spent about an hour and a half yesterday, kind of going over a very loose. Bud would make notes because with my short-term memory loss, Bud would make notes to kind of help keep me, to make sure we covered the stuff that we really wanted to cover. So, yeah. So if you have more questions, and keep in mind when you ask the questions, my answers are going to be, generally, it's going to be what I experienced at CCC. And as you'll see in some later broadcasts that we're planning, you're going to have some where you've got a guy from CCN, me, and a guy from CCS all on together talking about the differences. And also there's going to be one with me. And I won't give his name yet because you haven't advertised it, but one of our A1 pilots. Wasn't he an A1 pilot?
No, he was a fact. Yeah. He was a O2. He was a bird. Okay. No, he was a bird dog. Don Fulton. They know Don Fulton.
Okay. So this is one that I've wanted to do since I first heard about budcasts is talking about what any aircrew pilot or pilot saw from the air as opposed to what we would see from the ground. Because I've read some of the accounts or listened to some of the other stories, and the guy on the ground, all they know is that there's so many guys shooting at them that they must be in danger of getting overrun. And then on the same mission, you hear from either a chopper pilot or the A1 pilot or a FAC. You hear, well, I saw hundreds. I told them, I called and I said, there's hundreds and hundreds of guys coming at you from this side or whatever. So the guys in the air, their view or perception or whatever is totally different than what we would see on the ground. And I just always thought that would be an interesting one. And it sounds like there's enough people that think it is. We're going to do that very soon.
Oh yeah,
so
that's one that's been getting a lot of talk since I first mentioned it. Talking about getting Don on to talk about his DSC and all of that. So I spoke to him two or 3 days ago, and he said as soon as the computer's up and running, he's good to go and ready for action.
So you're the holdup.
I'm the holdup. Yeah.
Get your shit together, dude.
It's all on me here.
And to hold the little carrot out, when you get Don and I on, there's going to be some subjects brought up. For instance, the MiG that flew alongside my chopper. There's going to be
he's got some
the
good
Russian chopper. See, and I always wondered, did anybody else ever see a MiG? And it turns out that it was very common. And shit, yeah, me and Tony Love. That's going to be those are going to be more funny stories. It ain't going to be the blood and guts stuff. It'll be the humorous side of it,
the cut up side.
Yeah, and we'll have pictures. At least I'll have pictures.
Oh, Tony has got me some photos and everything. It's gonna, once the computer's up and running, I've got thousands of photos ready to go.
Party hard, play hard.
Oh, absolutely.
Work hard, and play hard.
Play hard. Y'all, y'all just get the questions in to me or Jason. Next time I'm gonna talk to Terry, and we're gonna set up a show for next week before the computer gets fixed. I'll advertise it enough and let Jason put it out on Twitter to get questions together. But other than that, Mr. Terry, is there anything else you'd like to say before we end for the afternoon?
No, I appreciate everybody having enough interest to listen in. Because once we're gone,
that's it.
Once we're gone and the stories aren't recorded, they're going to be gone. And
that's that's why we're doing what we're doing here and getting you on as much as humanly possible to where y'all can share. And while I've got the platform and give it to y'all, just tell every story you damn well can. A lot of thank yous coming in, but
thank you all, guys.
I'm gonna end up getting in touch with you today. And they're loving the budcast that you said. I may have to end up changing. Change that.
We might need to trademark it or something.
Yeah, I'm thinking we might need to. But I'll touch base with you either later on today or in the morning, and we'll see about start planning for the next one.
Well, it won't be in the morning because my one disabled vet student comes on Wednesdays. So
I forgot about that.
I'll be in the workshop. So you need to make it either this afternoon or late tomorrow afternoon.
We'll do it tomorrow afternoon because I'm about to have to feed the dogs and all that shit right now.
There you go. So, you got too much other shit going on. You need to.
I got my animal farm out here.
Good Lord. Okay, guys. Good seeing you. See you next week.
Yeah, we'll see y'all later.
Okay. What do I do? Just click off? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're good to go. See you later. All right, guys. Excellent episode. Mocha is tearing me up, wanting me to take her out. So, you guys, thank y'all. We had some really great questions. Jason, I'm loving the Budcast. Yeah, we may have to do an offshoot, maybe name the Patreon the Budcast or something. Infantry, you had a lot of great questions today. I hate it, man, but it's so close. I mean, we are so close. Daniel, God, Matt, thank y'all. We're so close to having the computer fixed. It's going to be just a complete game changer. So I'm extremely excited. And because we've got a lot of guests, but hell, we went 2 hours and 55 minutes. I thought it went pretty quick and a lot of great stories. Yeah, Jason, you're gonna get a lot of good. Pretty much all of the questions were answered. There may be a few that I didn't get to, but for overall, that we got most of them off of your tweet. But thanks, Kev. I'm glad you got to join in and watch. But I'll be in touch with y'all. Like I said, I'm gonna be getting with Terry. We'll knock one more out with Terry and maybe Tony. If I don't do it, we one with Tony. Me and Jason will do one this weekend. It'll probably be the first show when the computer's up and running, just to get everything the bugs worked out and everything, and then that'll immediately start all the brand new guests and all the crazy stuff. So y'all just bear with me another 8-9 days, and we'll be good to go. So thank y'all for sticking around. Thank y'all for supporting me. And if y'all got suggestions, pass them on to me or to Jason. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, man. I greatly appreciate this. All of y'all that have been listening, all the new subscribers and new listeners, I appreciate y'all as well. Like, subscribe, share, let y'all's friends know about it. Get it out there. Y'all have a wonderful evening, and I will be in touch with y'all as soon as I get some news going. See y'all.